Welcome to The Bigger Picture. My name is Derek Santhi, and I am so excited to have all these guests with me today. Directors have had an amazing time with the amount of new opportunities to get their films out, but again, quarantine has also taken away something from them as well. But I think that we've shown through, the light is there. Theaters are closing, yes, and some theaters are still open, but festivals are still moving forward, trying to find more gems out there, more indie, more love, more stories. And I think that the directors I have here today are beacons along the way. If you look throughout the year, you can see that there was a balloon being hit in the air during dark times. And I believe all of your films were there to kind of help keep everything alive and keep people interested. So I want to thank you all for coming today, and I cannot say how much I love all of your films. They are all part of my top 10 list here, of course, this year. So thank you very much. So moving forward, let us begin by talking about our guests here. First and foremost, I'm going to do this alphabetically. Max Barbakow, of course, graduated from American Film Institute, biggest sale of Sundance Film Festival, of course, beating by 69 cents. I don't know why 69. There's probably some some adult story behind that number exactly. I'm sure there's an adult reason for 69. And then, of course, it broke Hulu's view record, which if you've seen the film, how could it not? So, Max, thank you very much. Palm Springs is a delight.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so honored to be with all you dudes, and thanks for watching the movie and liking it. And for the record, it was Neon and Hulu's idea to add the 69 cents. I don't know where that came from.
Well, it's still an adult choice by far. As long as it wasn't $4.20 more, I guess, right? That was the other option. I'm sure they.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We were brainstorming some.
Moving down the line, let's go to Sean Durkin and The Nest. Of course, it premiered at Sundance, but he is no stranger there. Of course, Martha Marcy May Marlene was there prior. So unbelievably, just huge love in the indie scene, but also people who just enjoy characters and everything that's driven there. One character said of The Nest that even after The Nest, it's over, it still builds. And it still makes you feel. It still makes you think. And that's something that anyone who's watched it understands that. This thriller borderlining on horror is just it's impressive how much the characters imprint upon, I guess is the best way I feel about this film. They print upon their nest, and they print upon the world around them and the haunted nature of themselves. So I thank you very much, Sean, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Moving down, we talked to a man who created a film that kept me out of my seat because of the harrowing, immersive effect of it. Rod Lurie, I have to say that having your film and all of your characters, and I was eating up everything, and it was like a chili I was waiting to explode in my mouth, and it kept on spicing me over. I kept on having that spice. I was eating hotter and hotter wings constantly, and it would not stop. I'm a big man. Food is my metaphor here. So let's just keep on going with that. Of course, Rod. The film praised by veterans for its realism. More importantly, Rod, you've made some great stuff previously with The Contenders, Straw Dogs, and Resurrecting the Champ. A graduate of West Point, served in combat arms officer, I believe, as well. And you have held the title of film critic as well as reporter and editor yourself. So I thank you for being here today, and congratulations on a great film.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I was a film critic. I wasn't very good at it, which is why I had to make the transfer over there.
Well, you know what, the idea is that you tried, and that's really where most film critics start.
I gave it my best. It just didn't work out. I wasn't as good as some of the other film critics. And film criticism really is an art unto itself. And I really respect some of those dudes. I really respect the filmmakers. I'm really happy to be here with all you dudes. Made some really, really great films.
Well, you've gone the opposite way. Instead of those who can't teach, you decided to go to teaching directly. You decided to go directly to doing it. So congratulations there. Last but not least, the Nelms Brothers with Fatman. Now, this is a long road for you two. This is something that started in 2006. And to have a dream like that start where you're thinking, will this get made? Who was it going to be made? I mean, 2006, Mel Gibson might have been in your mind, but he might have been even a harder, huger star to get out there. You might have had someone smaller. It could have been Van Damme in your mind back in 2006. I don't know. I don't remember 2006 that far up away. That's what I'm trying to say here. I don't remember who was in 2006 or who was big. It's a long time ago in my mind. If people don't smile at the idea of a child hiring a hitman to go after Santa Claus after getting a lump of coal, then you are not cashing in your happy checks in life. Like, that's what you need to get. So I thank you all for being here. Of course, their previous films, Small Town Crime, Waffle Street, and Lost on Purpose. So thank you, Nelms Brothers, for being here, Ian and Eshom.
Derek, thanks for having us.
Thanks
Really
for having us,
appreciate
man. We're excited.
Great to be here with everybody.
Yeah, and a great panel. Thanks for having us with all these exceptional gentlemen.
And exceptional is definitely the word that I'm going to go with here. One thing I kind of want to start here, and this is going to be kind of an open question. Do you all kind of see yourselves as a writer-director? Even if you come into a project that was written before or written by another script writer, do you think of yourselves as a writer-director no matter what? So anyone could jump in on this one.
I guess we could start. Yeah, I feel like we do because I think it's our approach, right? We started off writing and directing things, basically out of necessity, because it's like, okay, well,
Can't afford to pay anyone, right?
afford to pay anybody to write it. Couldn't afford to pay anybody to direct it. We were the only, and we wanted to direct, so it was out of necessity that we just sort of had to wear a lot of hats. And I don't know if that is where everyone else started, but that's certainly how we got started. Is that we ended up editing, producing, writing, directing, and I think we definitely have in our minds that we're writer directors. And when we get on another project that someone does have a script, like we've done that before, where we took a script and we did a little polish on it, or we did a pass on it. Even in there, we try to approach it as if we were that writer as well. Because I mean, there is something we liked about it to start with, but there are things that you sort of have to do to make it so where you can make it.
But every project's different, and sometimes you find the script that's perfect and you shoot it as is.
Yeah.
Very cool. Was there anyone else who had any thoughts on being a writer director themselves? I mean, do you have to put a taste onto it?
Well, most of the movies I've made, I have written, and when I do come on movies that I haven't written, the subject matter is normally something that I know extremely well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten on it. And The Outpost was no different. I got onto a movie. It was written by these magnificent writers, Paul Tamisi and Eric Johnson, and they had been nominated for writing The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg a few years ago. But they're not soldiers. They weren't in the military. And when I got on, I, along with a couple of other military dudes, went and soldiered up the screenplay quite a bit. And there's something else that happens, Derek, to many of us, and that is that we come on to a movie and then you get the sticker shock of the budget, right? And the screenplay simply will not accommodate the budget, or vice versa, and you have to go in there yourself. My budget got slashed by 50, and then eventually by about 65%, and so it had to become. We had to narrow it down quite a bit. That doesn't mean just cutting out scenes. It means you've got to get really creative. For example, The Outpost, which is about the soldiers at the bottom of the Hindu Kush Mountains that are just sitting ducks, was a movie that had tons of scenes in the villages that surround the outpost. And I just had to simply knock all of those scenes out and move all the information with those scenes into the proscenium of the actual outpost. And so by definition, a director has to do a lot of writing on a script. So I've done a lot of writing. I've done a lot of screenwriting. But you do have to accommodate a movie to the whims of the budget or to true facts if you're making a true story. And so, so I definitely view myself at least as a writer-director.
Yeah, and I feel that, like, very similarly to what you guys have all said, where, I started out from a place of being sort of writing out of necessity to have something to direct. I was also cinematographer at first, editor, producer. And so in a way, no matter what role I came to making something, it was always thinking about the script. And then whatever position that was, it was helping the writer shape the script to fulfill the vision they wanted to fulfill. And so, yeah, if I'm the writer or if I'm just a director coming on to work with the writer, I'm usually drawn to that project because the writer offers something that I don't. And so my goal there is to sort of bring the best out of both of us, but very much my writing hat is always on, because at the end of the day, it's always about script for me and making sure the words are right and the story is there.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just say amen to everything everybody said. I quickly, when I was like a young filmmaker, realized that I wanted to direct, because even when I don't write stuff, and Palm Springs was a situation where I worked with my good buddy, Andy Ciara, who's the screenwriter. And it was kind of like a form of creative therapy. Did not start as a time loop movie, started as like a Jungian, absurdly comic version of Leaving Las Vegas, with like a hipster going to Palm Springs to die and then learning the value of life. And that wasn't very interesting after a very long wedding season where all these weddings started to feel the same. And I was like hopelessly single person, and Andy had gotten married in Palm Springs. It kind of evolved into something else. We had created the character of Niles and Sarah, and it became a love story and a wedding movie about self-love and opening yourself up and finding meaning in that. But it was all about that collaboration in a room with my buddy, a form of creative therapy. He would go off and write, and then we put it up and rework it. But I just like what I like about directing, even when I'm not writing solo or with anyone else, is like, I like to be kind of the first one on there and the last one off. I get to collaborate with all these amazing artists and really engage in the process. So I like to do it all, for sure.
Max, did the two of you guys, like the intricacies of Palm Springs, it's really just mind-boggling. And so did you guys like take out a chart and say, here are the rules of this world, or did you just wing it? And because it all of this works so perfectly when it's all done.
We should have. We definitely should have. Like, it was very unwieldy, you know. It was, we finished film school in 2015, and Charlie McDowell, the filmmaker, came with a movie called The One I Love that year. And we were like, let's do that. Let's go find one location and do kind of an existential comedy. Went out to the desert and brainstormed it. And like I said, there were all these false starts and iterations of this movie. But by the time we knew who these characters were, the Niles and the Sarah, and just like what their personal hells would be, which would be to be stuck with themselves and another person as they were afraid of commitment and intimacy. Like, that's when the time loop thing opened up. And it was, even then, it was kind of like reverse engineering everything we ever wanted to see in a movie in like a very nihilistic universe, and kind of,
Right.
you know, putting in dinosaurs. Okay, how do we make that work? Like, you know, like what if like the Roy character came last? Right. Before we sent it out to go get financing and stuff. So it was like not a clean process, but once we had kind of figured out the rules of the universe through 3 years of writing, it was about just putting it up on a screen and really just talking through the movie and acting it out and kind of like pressure testing it. And then once the Lonely Island guys got involved, it definitely took a turn into kind of more of the sci-fi realm. There was Andy Samberg had a great note right when we started working with him that was, you know, Sarah, this character, needs to try to get out of this time loop. And that's really, the third act was substantially reworked when we were in a room with those guys, which is great because they understood what we were after tonally, you know, emotionally. And that small room that Andy Ciara and I had been in for a few years, just kind of like working our shit out, got bigger with them, and it just got better. So it was like a really collaborative, amazing experience in that sense, where we figured it out by the time you saw it. So hopefully it made sense.
Well, one fun fact as well that I think Andy said was Niles, his character, was stuck in a loop for about 40 years. Is that about the right time that I think he mentioned? Is that what you guys think?
Yeah, it's like I think we said it was like a lifetime. In Sandberg's about 40, so that'll do. I like to say it's like anywhere between 40 and like 40 million. It was never like a long enough for him to forget his life before. And the dude drinks a lot too. So that has an effect, obviously.
It's true.
Eric, man, would you be troubled if I ask Max just one more question, because I'm just so
By all means.
fascinated.
By all means.
So, and maybe all of us have had this experience. Like I right now am trying to get a movie made. We got it financed and so on. But we're sending it to agents. We're sending it to actors, and it's got a lot of twists in it, right? There's lots of twists and turns, and we really don't want to get that out there. We don't want the film to be spoiled. And if too many people have got, the drafts of the screenplay, it's dangerous. So, Max, I mean, I don't even tell people what your movie's about, because what it's about is a twist, right? Like, you can set to watch it, because that's when you find out that, I hope this is not I assume most people watching this have seen your movie, that we find out that there is a time loop itself is a joy. So did you have that concern when the screenplay was going out, that, that you're letting these secrets out into the world? And how did you stop it?
No, because like no one gave a shit about us, which I think is why we were able to like do this weird script. No, like we were doing it for ourselves. We weren't writing for anybody. We never thought we would get to go make a movie with Andy Samberg in it, so it wasn't necessarily that it was going to be spoiled, because we were just we felt lucky if people wanted to engage and meet with us and potentially give us money and read it. It was more like the pitch on paper really isn't that interesting, like it could be summarized in a very basic way where you're like, oh, yep, there's a lot of time loop wedding comedies out there. So it was more about kind of like breaking through that and hopefully finding somebody who would be able, like The Lonely Island and Andy, to kind of recognize everything that was going on in it tonally and emotionally and what would make it distinct. But I don't know. I know you could do like the Christopher Nolan thing, right? And have people like come to you and lock them in a room as they read your scripts or something.
All right, jumping off of something you said earlier, Max, about going to American Film Institute, I kind of want to ask, what did film school not teach you as you got into this project, a bigger project? What did it not teach you?
I would say it taught. I think AFI is great because it's 2 years instead of 3. A lot of film schools are 3 at the graduate level, and you just make stuff. Like, it was a lot of time on set. It was super practical. They just throw you in there. And I was a directing fellow, and I got to direct on pro style sets and got to know kind of like, or Hollywood style sets, and got to know what that was like. So it taught me more than it didn't teach me. What it didn't teach me was just, when we went into AFI, a lot of instructors would say, enjoy this. You have a 4-picture deal right now. Plus you could do anything you want for 2 years. And you have the resources, and you can make stuff. And you leave there thinking, oh, great, that's going to continue. I'm going to make stuff immediately. Like it's just going to happen. And what it didn't, it was a honeymoon period. I was living in a bubble. It just didn't. I didn't leave there really realizing just how tough it is to get stuff made. And then you get something made, and even if it's a success, it's tough every time. You start back at zero, which is kind of part of it. It's part of the hustle, which is why I think you really have to make stuff that you care about, you can pour yourself into.
Yeah, I had a very similar film school experience. I graduated from NYU in 2005, I think, 2006. Can't remember. It was sort of blurry exactly when I finished. But one of the things that was still happening then was that there's still this idea that you'd like sell some screenplay and become like a hit screenwriter, and I always, like, whenever I went back to talk at school or teach, I would always like make sure to tell students that doesn't exist, that you're going to sort of like make this short at school, and it's going to be the thing that launches your career. It's going to be your calling card. It's just not really how it works. And so I think, luckily, I didn't really buy into it. I sort of knew it wasn't happening, but it was certainly hard getting out of school and just knowing that like everything you did in school is just the beginning, and so like I just kept making shorts and kept working for years after, and just kept basically took the structure I'd developed in film school and just kept doing it out of school. because yeah, it's things given to you no matter how well something does.
And I feel like that naivete though is the only thing that really keeps you going though, right? I mean,
Yeah, totally.
when you're sitting there and you're
Yeah.
you're in your bubble and you're thinking, oh, I'm just gonna do this, so we're gonna get to town in by 2 years, 2 3 years. I mean, hell, 2 3 years, that's forever. We're gonna have that house in the hills and we're making $20 million movies in 2 or 3 years. I mean, shit. And then you get down here and you're just like, oh my God, like I don't know anybody. I don't know how to get into the rooms to pitch anything to anybody. And if you'd known that when you first stepped out there, if you knew how long that was going to take you, or if you knew how long it was going to take to find somebody interested enough to go through the entire process of what it takes to make a movie with you, and
You
find
might-
all those collaborators,
You might have pursued that law degree instead.
you go to law school or something.
There's a lot of people out there who think the Sam Jackson role, you know, he got big in his mid to late 40s, so it's fine. I
Right.
still have time. Things are going to happen. It's like the guy out there who thinks he's going to become a extreme snowboarder at like 50 just because I want to.
I didn't go to film school. I went to the military academy at West Point, and I always felt that I always knew I was to be a filmmaker though. And I just thought you go to school to learn what you want to make movies about was probably the most important thing you could do. But I remember when I got out of the military, I said, okay, how am I going to become a filmmaker? And I said, well, the natural progression is to be a film critic first and then move along. And I discovered that nobody had ever done it in the United States, at least. There'd been film essayists like Bogdanovich and Jonathan Demme, but not like a critic on reviewing movies as they came out. And then I found out why. I mean, it's because you really piss people off, and then people want to have nothing to do with you. I had a screenplay out there that Ray Fiennes was interested in doing, and I was told, okay, you're going to go down to CAA to meet with his agent. I forgot who that was, but on my drive down, my producing partner, the guy who was trying to get that movie financed, called me and he said he just got notified by CAA that if you try to walk in to that building, security is going to escort you out because you said in one of your reviews that one of their clients looked like a testicle with arms. And so they got so pissed off that, and then I remember when I was trying to, I'll name names here because we made up about it, but I wanted Bill Paxton to be in a movie of mine called The Contender. And I had already made a small film at that point, so I had a slight amount of cred. And so I'm supposed to meet him at the Peninsula Hotel at like 9 a.m. for breakfast. And so I get there at 9 a.m. and Bill is already there and he's finished his breakfast. He's done. And when I got there, he said, listen, I just wanted to meet you to be able to tell you to fuck off. And he was still pissed about a review that I wrote about where I said about him, and I changed my mind about it completely. I thought he became a wonderful actor. I said, if you can take away someone's driver's license for bad driving, why can't you take a SAG card away after you do a movie? And then he left, and I got stuck with a bill. And then later, after he saw the movie, we actually became friends. And he's passed now, but he tells the story, I tell the story, and so it's okay. But it really worked against me to be a film critic for a very long time. And
I need to go through my Twitter, and I need to go through all my reviews too. Apparently, I gotta go through everything I've ever done now. I should check and see if any of my old homework assignments are out there somewhere on the web that I need to worry about. Who knows?
Rod, I was strangely driven to want to read a lot of your reviews right now.
You know what? Let me tell you something. I'm in luck because the way that Los Angeles Magazine had their contract, I owned all the reviews, so they can't put it up. They can't and won't put them online. Wow. And all my reviews when I was at KABC, they're unfindable. Thank fucking God. I was also incredibly politically incorrect, and I probably would get a lot of trouble if any of those things ever came out.
All right,
maybe you can just give them to me on the down low.
I'll let you know.
Moving over, I want to talk to the Nelms brothers here. As we know, with directing and production, the act of faith. the faith that it's not gonna rain, the fact that, you know, everyone's gonna have everything ready, things are gonna work, you know, all these things. You know, there's a million little things that go wrong constantly that a director needs to kind of fix. Do you remember anything specifically on your set for Fatman that really just kind of still is there? Like, it's like God came down and smited this one day, this 1 hour, this one moment.
Look, well, I think the first thing that Ian and I realized pretty early on, about the second or third picture, was like, oh, well, half of this job is creative and the other half of this job is just solving problems. Like, that's really 50-50. It's that much of the job. And you just have to sort of like stay calm and focus on the solutions and not get caught up with whatever catastrophe is happening over there on the right.
But yeah, in Fatman specifically, I would say probably the shootout was one of the most challenging things, mainly because we needed 4 days of consistent weather, and it in Ottawa in, you know, dead of winter, like we just couldn't tell. So we did the best we could using our sort of witching stick of dark skies and a bunch of other apps,
but also we were limited in that we couldn't be very selective in our days because of actor availability. So it was kind of like what they landed on is when we were shooting.
And so we had 4 days outside in an opening, you know, a very open environment. And it was like, okay, we knew we had, because the day we started shooting it, the first 2 days were like snow, heavy snow,
-30 degrees
and -36 degrees, I think exactly what it was. And really heavy snow, -36 degrees. And we were like, oh shit. Okay. So what do we do for the next 2 days if we don't get through all this stuff?
Sunny. And then it was overcast.
Yep, sunny and then overcast. So what we ended up doing was we ended up shooting the very beginning of it with those wides first, because we knew, you know, those were the hardest things to manufacture, right? Is the wide with the snow and everything kind of coming down. The close-ups we could do a little bit easier, you know, we thought in camera and with some post, with some CG. So we shot the wides, and then by the day of day two, midway through the shootout, we had gotten to basically the fire logs, where they're each on the opposite sides of each other in fire logs.
But to make the weather work continuity wise, we had to go and jump to the end of the fight scene where they're rolling around in the snow, stabbing each other and doing all that stuff.
On day 3.
So we did that on day 3, and then we went back to shoot the middle of the firefight on day 4, so that the overcast day would bridge those two.
And the biggest nightmare of that was snow continuity in between it all, because you have to work your way in with this snow, because it was about knee deep. And once you start putting a film crew and even just a couple of actors over it, you see all the tracks, and then once the film crew gets on it, it gets all padded down, so packed that it's obvious that, you know, an entire herd of buffalo have run over it 6 times. So there's just no like natural feel to it. So we had to start out and work our way in, and then we shot then we, you know, tried to shoot as much as we could strategically without making it look like, you know, the crew had trampled the entire snowpack down, which they had.
We definitely realized it would take a couple of knuckleheads from California to think a gun battle in the snow was a good idea.
Yeah, that was not our brightest moment, but aesthetically, it was incredibly worth it. I remember one of Esh's toes went numb for I think a couple weeks, and he got the feeling back, but it was worth it. You know, even if he lost the toe, I think it would have been worth it.
Okay, can I ask the wide shot first?
Exactly.
Can I ask you guys, you're working with Mel Gibson, who is himself an amazing director of action, right? And a problem solver himself. Did he just sort of sit back, or did he, you know, huddle with you guys at all?
Well, he would try to tell us things, and we'd just say, Mel, sit down. No,
come on.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
We pumped that guy for every bit of information that was possibly available. We would talk to him about all of his films. I mean, especially on those 4 days, because a cool little anecdote about Mel is that, like, he would refuse to go to the warming tents for those 4 days at -36, and he was in his costume, and we're like in fingerless gloves, and we're like out there ready to scale Everest. We're like in some serious gear, and he refused to go to the warming tent for the entire shoot. So he's out there for 14 hours with us, just in the snow. And he was like, if you're out here in this shit, I'm out here in this shit. We're like, all right. And it was an incredibly, like, very galvanizing thing for everybody, because it was nobody did, but it was a very opportune time for people to complain because it was too cold, or so cold, or I can't feel my face, or I can't even say the lines because my face is too frozen. But all the other actors, everybody was just like, let's do this. Like, this is going to be awesome. And everyone was just so down. But yeah, we pumped him for everything. He was talking about double printing frames on Braveheart, and we actually double printed some frames in a similar fashion on this one because we thought that it warranted it in one of the shots, and it stayed in the film. Yeah, we used every bit of information we could get out of the man. But working with him in a situation like this where he would be like, if he had a suggestion or something, he was so gracious about it that he would come up and say something like, hey, look, I love what's going on, or, take it or leave it, but, what do you think of this? Or what if I say this? Or if I move like this, would that be okay? Or whatever. And we're like, one, it disarms you immediately. Two, it's Mel Gibson telling you something, and that guy's, one of our favorite directors, if not one of the best living directors alive. Like, you're like, okay, yeah, give me some information. But it's just so, he had such a wonderful way of approaching it that it disarmed you. It became a discussion, and you would collaborate and come up with something great, and that you both loved. So yeah, it was a great collaboration working with him. He was phenomenal.
But we also did a ton of preparation for that scene. We had the entire thing like storyboarded out, and so he could see all that and see how the blocking was going to work.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate in that Esh is a professional storyboard artist, and if it's even two people standing across from each other or sitting across from each other in a diner, like the whole thing's storyboarded out. And that's not necessarily to say that we have to stay to that, but it gives you immediately an idea of what everything can be. And when Walton or Mel or Marianne or someone says, hey, can I move a little to the left or do a little bit of this? We're like, yeah, do your thing. But this is just how we initially blueprinted it out. But we're game to have some, movement in here.
Starting place.
Yeah,
that's great. One of the things that I did want to bring up, which is funny too, a lot of directors, as they begin, directors have a lot of fear of what they don't know because they get so amped up about the things they do know, blocking, lenses, all these things. But one of the things that I find that some directors are afraid of is actors, because they don't know how to speak correctly to an actor to get what they want sometimes. So it's like we're speaking English, but you're not getting what I'm saying, or it's not coming across. So I guess, have you all run into this? Sean, did you run into this as you've begun your way as well?
Yeah, I came up working in casting, and that's how I learned about actors. So I had this huge advantage, really. I worked for Susan Shopmaker, who's still my casting director, when I was in college, and for like pretty much up until I made Martha, I was still working for her. And so I would spend years running camera in these rooms and watching all these actors come in and out who they're all, I could see how good they were, and I could see sort of them not get roles, and could see sort of good directors in the room helping them, and then bad directors, making them feel insecure. I mean, it was such an incredible lesson on sort of how to talk to actors, and also making, it allowed me to get really great actors for my shorts, and also be very open to the knowledge that they have. Like, I'm very collaborative and always, open up. And I remember one of the most important moments was when I was making my student short film at NYU, and Paul Sparks and Rosemary DeWitt agreed to do it. I had met them through casting, and I was giving Paul Sparks some elaborate backstory for his character, and we're sitting having coffee, and he just goes, "Stop. Just nothing you're saying is helpful. Just," and it was just the most amazing, generous, loving thing to do. Because from that moment forward, it just became like simplest is best. And then and then I think the next part of that was having the confidence to say very little, because that's another thing. Because I've been on enough sets and made enough movies in many different roles where you see people get themselves into a hole by saying too much and trying to overthink. And one of the other big lessons I had was when I went to England to make Southcliffe. I was probably one of the youngest people on set, and I was the only American on set. And so there was this thing, and I'm working with some of the best actors in the UK, and I'm a quiet sort of American accent, and I could tell in the first few days they were like, "Is this guy gonna say anything? Like, what's wrong with this guy?" Like I wasn't sure if they trusted me, and so I really had to like bear through those first few days of being like, "It's okay. Like, I say very little, and eventually they'll catch on." So yeah, I just learned simplest is best.
I had a similar story as you did, Sean, with an actor who said, "Stop talking to me so much," and that was Sam Jackson. I was doing a movie called Resurrecting the Champ, and first couple of days, I would come in, I say, okay, Sam, let's talk about today's work and where we see the character going. And on day 2, he stopped me. He said, you know, you should just enjoy your breakfast. I got it, right? And Sam is a one-take guy. And like at the end of one take, I said, that's perfect, one more time. And he said, would always say to me, if it was perfect, why are we doing it again? And all I could say is, well, everyone else wasn't perfect, so we got to do it again. And you know, every actor, I think you guys will agree, it needs to be treated differently. You know, we cannot be monolithic in the way that we direct, because we're directing human beings and they desire and covet different things. I remember, and sometimes the really great actors will give you lessons, right? That you learn. Like I directed Alan Alda once in a movie called Nothing But the Truth. And it's a hospital scene, he's visiting somebody, he's responsible for Kate Beckinsale being in the hospital. And I said, and you know, I really need to get emotional, to shed a tear, to cry. And take 1 through 5 through 6, never cried. And eventually I gave up. And I told me, oh, that was, you did a great job. I thought that scene was great. And Alan, who's one of my dearest friends in the world, put his arm around me and he said, I just want to tell you, that was the worst piece of direction I've ever gotten in my life. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you don't tell an actor to cry. You tell them why they're crying, and we'll figure it out from there. Next time, tell me, give me the situation, and if I think it deserves tears, I'll cry. Although I'm not a very good crier. So, I mean, like, you know, the different actors will treat you differently. Although I must say, Sean, that, you know, your movie, The Nest, absolutely devastated me, and it devastated my wife. It was just such an unbelievably affecting film. And part of that, most of that, was the acting, right? The shocking realism of the movie, and the way, and especially from Carrie, because I can relate just because she's American, you know, that you get the sense of how trapped she is and how awful she feels and how she's at the end of her rope. And it's an acting feat that is as good as anything I've seen literally this century. I personally think she's one of the best actors on the planet. I would give anything to work with her. But how did you, I'm sorry, Derek, I know I'm stepping on your toes here.
No, this is what we're doing here.
Good. I'm really interested how you came up with her, because she is the perfect choice. She's not a huge star. Jude's a bigger star. How did you get her? And can you tell a little bit, like, I'm just so interested in this woman. Is there a lot of yapping with her, or does she just know what she's doing?
No, I mean, I'm very much what you said. Like, I work very differently with each person, and I'm very much there for whatever they need, right? So if someone, like, I'll have one meeting, and I believe in trusting, right? So I'll cast someone because I know they can do it. I believe they can do it, and I feel something, and it can be instinctual. I mean, it was like, and then I trust them to do it. And if they want to say, "Great, I've read the script once, I get it, I'll see you on set," and they don't want to ask me any questions, then I say, "Great, I'll see you on set." And, you know, that's happened a couple of times. Lizzie Olsen's like that. Carrie's like that. And so, you know, we did talk, obviously, but I just knew she understood it. We talk about the things behind the script too. Like, you know, I think Carrie and I were from very similar kinds of places, and we're the same age, and we shared some like details within our families that I just knew that she got it, and so it's just about trust, and then going for it for me.
It seems like a performance, Sean, that comes either from experience or something that she has witnessed, because it is so unbelievably real. Like, there is that sequence. I think it's the first time we see like a big drawn out fight. I think it's in the living room maybe, and she's on the couch, he's standing, and she just sort of snaps at him like a snapping turtle at some point. It seemed to be just a perfect acting choice, but also something that comes from very deep within. Anyway, you know, kudos to this just amazingly well. Everybody's great. Jude is great, and the kids are great. It's a master class in the directing of actors, up there with Sidney Lumet.
I thought, and I totally agree with you. And I thought that there was, it's probably the best I've seen Jude Law in a long time. He turns in great performances, but there was something about him and Carrie that was just, and I think a lot of it goes to credit to your writing as well, is that it like, you see the veneer wear off of everything as things get a little tougher, as the money starts to fall away, as the cracks start to emerge. And a guy that you loved in the beginning, because she seemed a little harder in the beginning and he seemed much more lovable, but then you just realize it's because he's not only conning other people, he's conned you. Like when he's playing soccer with his kid and he's, waking his wife up in the morning, and you buy into him so wholeheartedly because he's such a good guy, seemingly such a good dad. And then it's such a wonderful scene when he's getting driven back home by that guy, and the guy's like,
best.
well, everybody fucking does that. Don't pat yourself on the back for that shit. Because as soon as he says that, he's like, yeah, I'm a good dad. I'm flashing back to those scenes where he's playing soccer, and I'm like, you know what? He is a good dad. And then the guy's like, well, fuck. It's like that one joke. I can't remember who is it, where he goes, of course I got kids. It might be Chris Rock, where he's like, I got kids. Yeah.
I feed my kids. And like, oh
exactly.
Yeah, everyone's supposed to feed their kids.
Exactly. and he says, yeah, of course you're supposed to be able to fucking play with your kids and like, provide for your kids. Like everybody does that. That's the first step. Like, don't pat yourself on the back too hard. And then you go, you're right. This guy's pretty like
down the line.
He's pretty down the line. He's great in person, but when it really comes down to like, the person that has the spine in the relationship or that's really taking care of the kids or the family, it's the mom, who you seem as slightly more obtuse off the top, because like when she wakes up and he tells her, hey baby, I got a better plan. We're going to go to London. You're like, well, what is she bitching about? Like, what's this? But you didn't see, and she alludes to it. Oh, this was supposed to be paradise. This is supposed to be our last stop. And you don't get to live that with them, though. It's just a little bit of, and then when the cracks start to evolve and erode later, you're like, oh yeah, I see why she was pissed off that they're here. I see why, it all comes avalanching down, and all those fights make a whole lot of sense. And then, yeah, it's a beautiful movie. You did such a killer job with it.
Thanks.
Very much so. Moving along, I do want to kind of touch a little bit on Max and Palm Springs. The idea of a time loop is so interesting and fun, but I guess the real question I want to have is, how did you decide when to get off that merry-go-round? Because the time loop can be, never ending. You can go through. I know you all shot different endings, and Andy's family kind of tested it and different things like that. But where did you come up with the fact that this is where we should get off?
You mean like how the movie ended, or like how we kind of treated the loop throughout?
I kind of how the movie ended, like how you decided this is where we should get off. I mean, because the film with Andy and everyone else, I mean, it could have ended very differently. It could have ended in a sorrowful way, and you could have destroyed the heart of everybody in that Sundance little studio, that little theater, and just wrenched it out of them by making it dark and just driving somewhere else. So where did you? How was the thought process there to get off in that time loop in that location?
Yeah, I mean, we tested, I think we shot something like 6 or 7 different versions of the conversation in the pool that could kind of leave the audience in different places and lead them to different conclusions. And I should say, like, the ambition with the ending from the first time that we met with The Lonely Island was we all wanted to make something that would leave people, that felt complete, but would leave people to conversation when they walked out of the theater that was thought provoking in some way, like not ambiguous or confused, perfectly ambiguous, not confusing. To me, the movie really ends when they choose to go in the cave with each other. Like that is kind of the end of the love story in that arc. They choose love, they choose each other. They're not sure what's going to happen. And we tried that ending. That was very depressing, cutting to credits from black after that explosion. That didn't quite work. But it really was, I think everybody who worked on the movie has kind of a different idea of how it ended and where they ended up. I know Kristen Milioti thinks they're dead in heaven, which is funny. But they, to me, the ending, I think it gives people hope that they got out of their predicament. To me, it doesn't matter. They've chosen each other, and they've chosen to be with one another in that pool. And there's dinosaurs on the horizon,
Very much so.
Can I ask something about Roy? So you said Roy was a late addition to the story?
Yeah. So Roy, we had the movie written, and it was good, but it just felt like it was like missing some sort of propulsive action or something, you know, kind of like a B story. And I saw this article in the LA Times. This was maybe 2016 or 2017. There was the dean of the USC Medical School, who was this really renowned eye doctor, who was found in a hotel room in Pasadena with, I think, like a prostitute and a bunch of crack cocaine. And in his life, it was kind of exposed as like this dude living a double life, like this really successful professional, like renowned eye surgeon who was just a degenerate and kind of a criminal at that too. It's like, that's really interesting. And then I don't know, Raising Arizona just kind of popped in my head, and that vision of the apocalyptic biker and that idea of like kind of cutting back to something that you're not quite sure what it means, or introducing an element that you're not quite sure what it means, but it fuses lit, and it just kind of ballooned out from there. And the Irvine scene is like kind of the, you know, it gave us the thesis of, you know, really the core and the message of the movie there too. So it came quick once we started playing with that, but it was really, I feel like a couple of weeks before we went out to try and find financing. It just was like that last thing. You know
what? 20 years ago, Nick Cage would have been perfect in this movie, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that. It's that Roadrunner, you know, Wile E. Coyote relationship. And it's my favorite. It's a movie full of twists, right? It's a twisty movie, but my favorite twist, I think, is that what Roy provides, which is 15 minutes in, you're like, all right, I'm in this wedding rom-com, and then he gets hit by an arrow, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? You know, it's
so much happens in this film. Let me tell you something, Max. You know, when I was a critic, I was an expert on the Academy Awards. That's all I was obsessed with it since I was a little kid. And I think that, normally speaking, comedies are really just, especially 90-minute ones, are just not in the mix of the Academy Awards. But the reason why I think you have a good shot this year is that it's very simple. It's something, and Derek, take this into account as you make your predictions. This year, everybody's seeing movies at home. And some movies survive home screenings much better than others. Could you imagine, for example, the first time you saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, or anybody had seen it, would be at home? People would be out of there in 5 minutes. They'd be, you know, turning to their wife, and, you know, it's the reason why I think Roma, which was seen mostly at home, probably an amazing immersive experience in a theater where you're invested, right? So that's why it didn't win Best Picture, I think, and why, you know, some of these, like There Will Be Blood, would not have survived at home because of that first 20 minutes. People would be out of it. The great thing about your film, it's really true of Bad Santa as well, is that these are like bullets out of a gun. I mean, people are invested from the very beginning. That's why I think like Aaron Sorkin's movie, which is a great film, is, you know, he will have people staying with it from the beginning. I think people surrender to some very good movies, you know, very, very quickly. I've watched some of these films, and, you know, people I'm watching with don't want to stick it out, you know. But your movie is like, boom, right from the fucking start. It's like, it's so propulsive. It's great.
Thank you.
And you don't
much.
And you don't really know, for me anyway, when I was watching with my wife, I mean, we loved it. We cracked up to the whole thing, but there was the moment where the choreographed dance moves out on the dance floor is it's so fucking awesome. And you instantly go, oh shit, there's like, he's either in a time loop, or, you know what I mean? Your mind starts racing because there's no way anybody's that fucking perfect. He's not that good. He can't be that good. No one can predict that well. But yeah, your mind starts racing.
Derek, we have to figure out something bad to say about each other. It's starting to look a little suspicious here.
Well,
yeah, right.
You know, these are all good movies. Really good movies.
Everyone's movie was already made, so none of you is going for the same budget, the same time, you know, the same slot date or anything like that. So I think we're all fine here. We've gotten past that point, so we can always the brotherhood of directors is alive and well right now. You know, one thing I do want to ask is if anyone has any specific film, or even maybe a specific director they watch before they start a project. Is there someone that you have that gives you that spark, that inspiration every time You know, for me, it's every time I hear the old Superman theme song, I feel like I could punch through a wall. I can't, and I'm very aware of that, but I want to feel like I can. And so there are certain things like that that kind of, inspire you. So does anyone have, I mean, Sean, do you have a specific film perhaps that you watch, or a director that kind of inspires you as a filmmaker?
I mean, there's so many. I think the one, I've sort of done a few things this year and doing press for the Nest, talking about favorite films and most influential films. And every time I make something, the references are slightly different. But the one film I've come back to every single time I make something is Clute. And I think Pakula and Gordon Willis together is maybe one of the greatest collaborations of all time. And Jane Fonda's my favorite actor of all time, maybe, and so the combination of that and her performance and her wrestling with duality in New York City in the 70s, and it was just like has this combination of naturalism and cinema and thriller. It's just sort of my perfect combination.
You know what? It wasn't true of my movie, the Outpost, this year, because it was so different. But my go-to movie is another Pakula Willis film, and what can that only be?
President's Men.
All the President's Men. I mean, it's probably of my generation of directors, probably the most. I would say it's one of the most influential films. But All the President's Men, and for its naturalism and it's it's, I think it's one of the first times a split diopter was used. I mean, there was a lot of creativity in the photography. I also turned to Paths of Glory quite a bit, which was very much a part of the Outpost. But I think that all of us, Derek, want to do something creative and something that's quite unique whenever we make a film. I went to see Dunkirk, the great Chris Nolan film. And when I saw it and it came out of it, I realize now, when you make a war film from now on, it just can't be your standard issue, action film that is being disguised as a war film. In other words, you have to find something creative. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, what will be the most sort of creative approach to making the Outpost. So while there are definitely films that we can look to as antecedents and that have greatly inspired us, I think that most of us are really seeking to become that film that people will use in the future to inspire them.
I mean, there's so many different people who have given notes of tastes of different films and associated with the Outpost. Of course, Black Hawk Down was one. You even had Orlando, who was in both. Did he have any thoughts about the similarities of this war and this kind of fighting style and the shooting, or did he see a complete difference?
Well, first of all, we didn't have the budget of Black Hawk Down. I maybe 1/10 of the budget. I maybe had $3 million on the ground over there in Bulgaria to make this film, and it's a big ass film. I had a little bit over 30 days, and so what I decided to do was that I'm going to shoot every one of the battle sequences as one fluid shot, as a oneer, and that's my wife, by the way, in blue, and that way, if I could succeed in shooting those sequences without having to do them too many times, then I would be able to finish and make my days. But also, it would create an extremely immersive combat situation if you could stick with one soldier through the entirety of a sequence. There's no cutting away at all, and you're experiencing it with him. And so that meant that everybody had to be totally in sync, especially the actor. And I do believe, in my personal humble opinion, that Caleb Landry Jones, who plays a Medal of Honor recipient in my film, gives, in my opinion, one of the great combat performances of all time. And it's part of that has to do with the fact that these guys were forced to live in the moment, and the actors had no escape either. I think those of us who have done these oneers will tell you that sometimes that's really some of the best acting that you can get.
Well, it's funny when you were talking about your film and the things that you had to cut because of budgetary constraints, where you said you had to sort of get it out of those villages.
Yeah.
You have that one scene where early on where Orlando goes and sits with them, in sort of a tent environment, and then you see him sort of, winning them over, thank goodness, and then obviously that goes awry. But I thought that keeping them in, it's interesting because keeping them in that sort of base, with the sheer sides of the mountain all coming down all around them, and they're just fucking, you feel the claustrophobia, you feel it. And I felt living in that base, you have that little Wages of Fear sequence where they decide to try to drive that truck out, which was great too. But for the most part, it's in
the base.
You're in there and you feel it. And I feel like that's a big strength of it. So out of
that's what I thought as well. And that, the villain, whenever I see those movies of in the Afghanistan war or even the Vietnam War films, when they start going into the villages and start interacting with the communities, for some reason, it's deflating. I can't, and sometimes they're very tense situations. But, I like the fact that they're under this constant pressure, that they are being shot at every day, that there's no scene that is without tension because you don't know if somebody's going to get shot from a mountain, out of, basically out of nowhere. And that's only helpful if you're always in that proscenium.
Right. Yeah, and I thought your approach with the Oneers gave me a similar feeling. I mean, not only the reality in real time, rather than sort of like you could say a bullshitty action experience where you're cutting all over the fucking place. Like it kind of puts you in the back seat with those guys, and it puts a lot more tension and a lot more emotionality in the scene because you're stuck with it.
I made this movie for Millennium, and Millennium is extremely successful at doing these mid-budget range action films like The Expendables or Rambo and those films. And so they are really used to, how you shoot those action sequences. And when I told them we're going to do them as Oneers, that at first was like not acceptable. They said yes, and I think they were hoping that somewhere along the line
you were going to wise up.
I would change my mind, and they said, well, let's put extra cameras here and there, which we did, and they are smart people. But I kept having to reemphasize that we're doing a war film and not an action film. And I'll tell you something else really quickly, which is that this could go really badly, right? It could go really badly if you fuck up the scene and you have to do it 5, 6, 7 times. But if the person that's going to have the most difficult time is the camera operator, because the camera is heavy and he's got to run with these guys. And we tried to figure out a way not to exhaust our operator, and how could we possibly do it? Because I can't give him a 45-minute break between shot. And so what we did was, my DP remembered something they did on the movie Das Boot, which is they disassembled the entire camera. They put all the components into a backpack with a cable connected to the lens. And so all that the operator had to do is run with a lens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and a monitor, right?
Writing that down mentally.
So that made his life much easier. And so I could do 3 takes within 2 hours.
Wow.
And we ended up having early days on that show, which is crazy, but we did.
I thought it came off phenomenally. I thought you did a stellar job. You really did.
That's really my operator, my DP are like geniuses, and so.
And I thought the performances you got out of those guys was fucking great.
Caleb Landry Jones.
He certainly stands out.
All you guys got to work with him. I'm telling you.
Top 5 on my list of actors this year, automatically.
Yeah.
What I do want to go into, you were talking about, budgets being cut, and we talk about things not working. I go back to the idea of Bruce the Shark not working for Jaws and things like that too. Was there any happy accidents that you think kind of made your movie better because you had to come up with a better inspired idea in your films? Did anyone have anything like that where you had to make something work, and at the end when you're sitting in that editing bay, you were just glowing with happiness because this works so much better in your opinion?
Think of anything? I can't think of anything right now.
It's not necessary. I can
tell you some things we got away with.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about it. Is that I remember at one point we had to go to our production designer and cut $250,000 out of the budget, which because we were over in that department, and we were just like, okay, because the guy had a lot to pull off for a little, and it was just like, okay, how are we going to do this? And he came up with a game plan, and then we had moved down the line with it, and then all of a sudden we had some budget reductions that happened, and it was like, okay, how do we pull this off with $250,000 less? And things that were going to be affected were like the barn aesthetic, and the stable, and the Elves workshop. And so it was like, okay, well, those are obviously things that we have to pull off to a certain, believability. And it wasn't necessarily that I felt in the editing room that I was like, thank God. It was more like, well, thank God we had enough to make it work, because there was so much more we wanted to do in certain areas that just wasn't possible. And I think that really is, as Esh was saying earlier, like that really is 50% of the job, is to like, okay, well, you don't have that. How do you do this? And if you don't have this, how do you do that? And then, then the other half of it is like, okay, we're actually out here shooting and this is fun and we're on schedule if you're on schedule.
But exciting things come from the limitations, and you can find really creative ways to get out of it. So.
Sure. I mean, just the way that we ended up having to build, I mean, we always had the same aesthetic, but the way that we ended up building a lot of the stuff in the Elves workshop, the underground workshop, was out of necessity. But I mean, do we think that if we'd had $250,000 more, it would have been,
a bit different,
different and a little more in law, exactly of what we were hoping for? Yes. But I mean, do we really like what we had? Yes. So
just enough. That's the sweet spot.
Derek, I think that one of the answers to that question, maybe for all of us over our careers, have been actors that we had to replace. I don't know how many of you have had this experience, but usually it's almost always for the better. And most of the times we're really happy with it. Like, we can't imagine anybody else in the roles. But like in the Outpost, there was one guy that came in and he was not in the physical condition he should have been. And the military experts took me aside and said, if you let this guy do this role, not only will he not be able to do it because of his physical limitations, but it's going to be a slap in the face of the soldier who died in this battle, who was portraying him. And I went, fuck, that's not good. And I had to fire that actor and actually put him in a different role. And he's a wonderful actor and a wonderful guy, but just was not prepared. And I had to go out at the last second and do an audition in Britain, where they have some guys who play Americans great, to find a guy to play one of the top roles in the movie, and that was like scary, there's all of us have probably had to replace an actor, and it's usually it's for the better. I would say.
We're already over, so before someone has to cut our budget and our time, I do want to end with this last question here. What is a piece of advice that you've taken to heart, that someone has given you, or maybe you even heard? I remember one time I interviewed Guillermo del Toro, and he told me about directors and teaching kids, and he told me that every song has been sung, but just not in your voice. And like that resonated with me. Like to tell me that every story is new and fresh when it comes in touch with a different person, and we all leave a little piece of ourselves with it. So if I could start with all of you and kind of ask that question, Max, was there a piece of advice that you've taken?
Yeah, I had a mentor at AFI named Gil Dennis, who was a great writer. He wrote Walk the Line. And a bunch of other films. And it's kind of how Andy, Ciara, and I really bonded and became friends and collaborators in this workshop that was all about writing and taking personal inventory and kind of bleeding on the page. And his whole thing was always have the courage of your peculiarities, which is something that I love and get away from all the time, whether it's out of fear or logistical reasons or just, second guessing yourself. And it's something I remember all the time and try to lean into.
Wonderful. Sean, do you
have
same?
Yeah, exactly the same. I mean, it's it's a brutal industry that will tell you that you're doing something wrong, or that you could do something better, or you could do something that has more appeal, or, it's just continually leads you to doubt and question. And I think all you can do as a filmmaker is be yourself, and know that you can only make the film that you can make, and just embrace yourself and your interests.
Rod?
Well, the piece of advice that I would give to people,
Or one
starting out
that's helped
is-
you, or one that
well,
you've
I
held
know,
on
but
to.
what I want to say first though is don't believe it until you're on the set yelling action. That we can all agree with that one. When I was a film writer, I would interview directors all the time, and at the end of every interview, I would turn the tape recorder off and I would say, I want to do what you're doing. Can you give me a piece of practical advice? And I don't mean things like believe in yourself, always try your best, never give up. Something really even small, and every one of them had some like peculiar little piece of advice. I spoke to Hal Ashby, I spoke to Steven Spielberg. James Cameron told me, when it comes to sound, he says sound can be anything. Don't be locked into realism at all. Sound can be absolutely anything. If you have a scene where there's a football team running across the field, you can use a herd of zebras. You don't need to go out there and get the sound of the actual football team running across the field. And in my movie Straw Dogs, I had a football team running across the field, and I used the sound of a herd of zebras. And so I took his advice to heart. But I got tons and tons of these, and always be on the lookout for that kind of advice.
What did Hal Ashby tell you?
Yeah,
Hal
that's a good
Ashby
one.
talked to me about the best way to get a realistic emotional scene out of an actor, if you're not getting it, is to have that actor, you tell them, there is no such thing as overdoing it. Go way over the fucking top. Go absolutely fucking hysterical. So have enough film in the camera, because the minute that they finish that, say, start it from the top and give me absolutely nothing, zero. A residual emotion will give you the great scene. I've tried that a few times, and it's just uncanny how it has worked.
Amazing.
That's what Ashby told me.
Ian and Eshom, anything that has been imparted onto you?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's the one that's your network is your net worth. So Ian and I go out there. We try to treat people how we like to be treated, nurture those relationships. I think it's such an important part of the collaborative process.
Yeah, and that goes from the actors all the way down to the PAs you're working with, or just even people you talk to on a daily basis. You just never know when. I don't know. You never know when you're going to get a good piece of advice, or you'll end up working with somebody down the road, or be open. You know what I mean? And one thing that served us well, and I don't know if we read it somewhere, or if it just ended up being, sweat equity, but make stuff like that's. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is it's like, oh, I can't make this because I don't have $1 million budget, or I can't make this because I don't have this or that, or like our first feature film was $1,500, and we did all the post ourselves, and we shot it over the course of 7 days with some people that we just knew from the, crappy day jobs we were working. And we cobbled together $1,500 and went and shot for 7 days. And that feature film went and got into a half a dozen film festivals. And that experience back in like 2003, 2004 we were actually sitting in real movie. We were sitting in real movie theaters watching, our movie that we had made with a 3-man crew. People laughing in the right places, and it was just, we became completely addicted to the process.
It's even easier now. All of our phones shoot better than the equipment we were doing it with then.
That's exactly right.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I want to thank all of you. This was an amazing time. I hope you all had fun too. I want to allow you all to talk to each other. And truthfully, I could let this go on for hours and hours, which I feel that is a possibility as well. You know, somewhere along the way, there's a possibility for all of us to grab a drink or coffee or something. I feel that this conversation would keep going, and there's so many different stories and little anecdotes and things that are just hidden away, ready to come out. Beyond that, though, I think I'm sure you are all extremely proud of what you've done this year, and I think you should be, because it's an amazing work, and I feel that every person who needed something got it from one of your films this year easily. You know, whatever emotion they were looking for, I think they found it within your film. So I thank you once again, and I hope that the next future project is already on your mind. It's already on a paper, or it's already being storyboarded somewhere, and we will all look forward to it, whether we are regular viewers on the couch or people working on our projects ourselves, looking for inspiration, or at least to see that other friends out there are doing well. So thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. It was wonderful having this time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.